Shocking! The emperor called for the concubines 7 times in one night. Your Majesty's sweaty feet, a palace secret everyone knows. 7 cold tales of the deep palace, how many do you know? Don't ask me why I dare to write such things. The master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion said that as long as the common folk love reading my tabloids, he would ensure I stay well hidden from the authorities. I believe him, after all, knowledge is power. After passionately finishing The Scandalous Cool Emperor and The Pretty Village Girl, the masked master appeared behind me.
Emily, pack your things.
Are we moving?
No,
Then what?
the authorities are coming to arrest you.
My brush slipped from my hand. I had trusted the capitalist's promise not to use me as a scapegoat.
Emily, listen to me. Actually, we are also an undercover organization. You won't be easily executed. When you see the Emperor, you must find a chance to eliminate him.
Is this how missions are assigned? As the soldiers broke in, the master vanished, leaving me and my scandalous cool emperor and the pretty village girl to be captured. On the way, I cried, thinking of the ancient tortures, and fantasized about returning after my demise. In the midst of sorrow and hope, I met Emperor Alexander. He was indeed as handsome as I had described, broad shoulders, narrow waist, a perfect clothes hanger.
Are those vile rumors about me in the streets you're doing?
Yes, but these are based on real events, 1 piece of news, 1 silver ingot.
Hearing my words, Alexander's face darkened further.
So, you think you did the right thing?
No, but at least I maintain the truthfulness of the news.
News?
Yes, just some fresh stories. But Your Majesty, at least I truthfully portrayed your heroic image.
Embracing a reckless attitude, I brazenly spoke to the emperor.
Oh. So, you can write good things about me too?
Yes, I know a bit.
After all, I did study journalism for 4 years.
Good. Someone announced the decree. I will make her a concubine. He bent down, grabbed a lock of my hair, and said sinisterly, I will make you a joyful concubine. Stay in the palace and write. I want to see what you can produce.
Is it the joyful?
It's the foolish. He glanced at the paper in my arms. What's this?
This is my latest work from an hour ago. Cool Emperor and the Pretty Village Girl.
Someone! Send her to the cold palace.
The cold palace here is just like the song describes: iron doors, iron windows, iron chains. For the first time since traveling through time, I started to miss home. But before I could dwell on it for long, an eunuch walked in with some ingredients.
Your Majesty is kind and does not mistreat those in the cold palace. However, you will need to prepare your own meals. These are for you.
Thank you. As long as there's food, I can hold on a bit longer.
Suddenly, the eunuch grabbed my sleeve and whispered, Master said you should rest assured and carry out the plan to eliminate the emperor. Once it's done, someone will help you escape the palace.
How should I do it?
Master said seduction might work.
Capitalism, ugh.
But how do I get out?
Master didn't say.
Fine, I'll rely on myself. That night, I stayed up writing and finally finished a grand ode before dawn. I presented it to Alexander, hoping he would get me out of this wretched place. But no, all I got was a big red cross on the paper. From then on, I flattered Alexander day after day, singing his praises every night until I was creatively exhausted, yet saw no hope. Just as I was about to give up and start farming in the cold palace, Alexander came alone. First, he criticized my chair for not being clean enough, then he complained about the poor quality of tea I served. After a round of sarcasm, he fell silent. After a while, he looked up and asked,
You come from outside. Tell me, am I a good emperor?
Your Majesty is diligent and loves the people. You are certainly a wise ruler. I seized the opportunity to flatter him.
Really?
Of course.
Forget it, you only know how to write. How could you understand the affairs of the state? He smiled bitterly.
Your Majesty, do you know about the sea swallow?
He looked at me curiously, and I sat up straight, ready to recite. After I finished the entire piece, Alexander was so inspired that he stood up from his chair.
The ambition of a swan, unshaken by storms. Even though I didn't understand some of your words, if animals have courage, how can I not?
He was about to leave, and I quickly grabbed his sleeve.
Your Majesty, I wish to go out.
Alexander's mood improved, and he smiled slightly. He reached out and plucked a piece of grass from my hair.
Granted.
Alexander had me moved into the Weiyang Palace. The first meal had 8 dishes and a soup, a stark contrast to the days in the cold palace. But I had no appetite.
So many stories of women who couldn't adapt to the palace life and ended up in despair came to mind.
My cheerful and straightforward nature made the palace an unsuitable place for me. It seemed that the only way out was to deal with Alexander. After much thought, seduction seemed the only viable option. When the moment came, I could strike decisively.
Don't think that just because you're out of the cold palace, you can stop writing. I want an article every day.
Alexander's demeanor was impeccable. Everything he did was precise and elegant. As he walked in from the doorway, even the swaying of his robe was aesthetically pleasing. He sat down and gestured for the maid to set the table. Remembering my plan, I awkwardly stood up and walked over to him. Under his puzzled gaze, I sat on his lap. He stiffened instantly, and so did I. The attendants in the room tactfully turned their backs to us. I hesitated, wondering if I should put my arms around his neck.
What are you doing now?
He looked down at me, his voice soft, probably to avoid the awkwardness of his breath on my face. Hearing his tone, my face flushed. Despite my inner turmoil, I tried to look up at him with wide eyes.
My lord, please be gentle with me.
Seeing his hesitation, I quickly pressed on.
Am I not still your clingy little kitten?
Isn't this what the domineering CEOs in dramas like? I felt Alexander's breath hitch, and then he picked me up. He carried me towards the bed, and I felt a glimmer of hope. Was I about to succeed? Was freedom within reach? The next second, he threw me onto the bed.
Do you take me for a foolish ruler? I sentence you to 7 days of confinement. Reflect on your actions.
With that, Alexander left with his entourage. I glared at the ceiling, a headline popping into my mind.
Exclusive. Why the emperor can't perform.
If I could go back, I'd definitely write another one.
Confirmed. The emperor hates clingy women.
Because of my bold attempt to seek an audience at noon, I became quite the sensation in the palace. When Isabella arrived with a group of concubines, she couldn't help but marvel at how inclusive Alexander's harem was. No wonder even she could be made a concubine.
Greetings to the noble consort. Seeing the voluptuous beauties in low-cut dresses and adorned with golden hairpins, I quickly paid my respects.
You mistook me for someone else. This is the noble consort.
I looked up to see a handsome woman in men's attire, holding a sword. I hesitated.
Is she the noble consort?
Indeed.
In the noisy environment, I was introduced to everyone. The one I mistook was Sophia, the one gnawing on a pigeon was Grace, the one covered in dirt from the garden was Charlotte, and the one holding a cat and leading 5 dogs was Victoria. They surrounded me, asking me to recount the story of how I tried to charm Alexander a few days ago.
When I mentioned that he had picked me up and thrown me onto the bed, they all fell silent, exchanged strange looks, and then excitedly exchanged glances again.
In this atmosphere, I felt a chill. Was this the start of palace intrigue?
Sister, this book contains all of His Majesty's preferences. With it, you will surely win his favor.
The noble consort handed me a book and then left with the others in a hurry. I was left alone in a room filled with the scents of perfume, roasted pigeon, and dirt, feeling utterly confused. Why did this script feel so different from other time travel stories? A few days later, Alexander came again, looking rather displeased.
I quickly offered him his favorite tea. He didn't take it. So, I offered him his favorite pastries. He didn't take those either.
Hesitantly, I tried to sit on his lap, but he suddenly turned away.
Massage my head.
I immediately placed my hands on his temples and began to massage.
Somehow, as I massaged, I got lost in thought. My hands moved to press his feng qi acupoints, then his temples, and then around his eyes. Just as I was about to press his Jingming acupoints.
Are you trying to extract oil from my face?
My fingers trembled, realizing I had messed up again.
Your Majesty, please don't blame me. If I keep making mistakes, it's only because I desire to be close to you.
Thinking about my recent absurd experiences and the seemingly impossible tasks, I actually started to cry, feeling deeply sorrowful. I covered my face and sobbed. After a while, I felt Alexander squat down in front of me. He gently moved my hands away and used a dark handkerchief to wipe my tears. After he wiped my face clean, another tear rolled down from my eyes. Alexander patiently wiped it away with his thumb.
Do you really want to share a bed with me? He paused. Sleep together?
I nodded vigorously.
Can you wait a bit longer? He awkwardly turned his head away and then helped me up from the ground.
This was the first time he had been so gentle with me since I entered the palace. Was this the moment when the cold emperor reveals his gentle side?
Did I say that out loud?
What do you think? I was wrong!
My mission was far from over. Instead of luxury, I was summoned to the Golden Throne Hall to serve as a verbal defender. By day, I countered objections from stubborn officials. By night, I wrote character profiles for the emperor. Who works 3 jobs in one day? Arriving at the Golden Throne Hall, I saw Alexander's struggle firsthand. The officials constantly hindered his policies, even those beneficial to the people.
Your Majesty, this is outrageous. State affairs are of utmost importance. How can you allow a woman to interfere in court matters?
I am merely making her a female scribe. What's wrong with that?
Your Majesty, women should not interfere in state affairs, Your Majesty.
The Prime Minister's spittle almost hit my face as he ranted. The other officials followed suit, kneeling and shouting.
Your Majesty, please reconsider.
I couldn't help but laugh, quickly stifling it when I saw Alexander's look.
You! How dare a woman mock me?
The Prime Minister's hand trembled with rage.
What woman? Call me the verbal defender.
I bravely walked up to him, ready to confront him.
Prime Minister, you keep talking about rules and etiquette, but now that we are both officials, how can you address me without my title?
You.
Call me the verbal defender.
I brushed his hand aside and straightened my logic.
Prime Minister looks down on women, but how come I heard your youngest concubine just turned 16? And you, Lord Johnson, I heard you allocated 5 acres of prime land in the suburbs to your brother-in-law? And isn't that Lord Smith? Didn't your son just break someone's leg and the matter was resolved?
I had been writing gossip for years and knew a bit about their affairs. Their faces turned various shades of blue and white, and they all lowered their heads, silent.
Do you think His Majesty doesn't know about these things? He just respects your hard work and old age. But in the end, this kingdom still belongs to the Alexander family.
I bowed to Alexander, who looked at me approvingly.
I advise you all not to forget your place just because of His Majesty's respect.
After that day, several officials resigned and returned to their hometowns. The number of stubborn officials in the court drastically decreased, and the Prime Minister stopped interfering with Alexander's new policies. As for me, I became even more popular in the harem. The noble consorts visited me again, reminding me that winning the emperor's favor was the most important thing. My mission had stalled for too long, it was time to move forward. The emperor's decree was announced with a stern tone, sealing my fate.
Good. Someone announced the decree. I will make her a concubine.
He bent down, grabbed a lock of my hair, and said with a menacing tone,
I will make you a joyful concubine. Stay in the palace and write. I want to see what you can produce.
I looked up, confused by his words.
Is it the joyful?
It's the foolish. What's this?
He glanced at the paper in my arms.
This is my latest work from an hour ago, Cool Emperor and the Pretty Village Girl.
Someone! Send her to the cold palace.
Since that incident, Alexander seemed to have tied me to his belt, taking me everywhere he went. Seeing his genuine affection, I couldn't bear to think about the assassination plan anymore. On the day of the Chongyang Palace banquet, all the nobles of the capital were present. After a performance, they took turns toasting Alexander. I indulged in the feast until Duke Henry raised his glass and approached Alexander. That voice. Master. I kept a calm face, but I was grinding my teeth. Finally, when he went out to sober up, I seized the opportunity to approach Duke Henry.
A vivid tale of spring beauty?
The first report of strange news. He hiccuped, and then I knocked him out.
Today, I will strike the first blow against injustice.
I dragged and kicked Duke Henry back to the sleeping quarters. As soon as I entered, Alexander, who had already returned, asked what I was up to.
What are you doing?
Quick, send this message to your emperor. The current duke is actually the master of Tianji Pavilion. I winked playfully at him, then poured a teapot over the unconscious Duke Henry.
Leo, you ungrateful wretch.
That night, Duke Henry, or rather Christopher, sat at the table, tearfully recounting the untold stories between him and the original owner.
I found you on the street 5 months ago, injured and unconscious. Feeling sorry for you, I took you home. Later, I found out that only the family of the Assistant Minister of Revenue had lost a daughter, and they had always treated you poorly. So, I decided to do a good deed and set you free. Who knew that after you woke up, you claimed to be able to write tabloids? Finding it intriguing, I hid my identity and partnered with you to make money.
So, you're just an investor profiting off my work. yet you only gave me 30%.
Sensing the danger, Christopher quickly excused himself. It wasn't until the next day that I realized the real issue wasn't that he was the master of Tianji Pavilion, but that he intended to harm the emperor. As I was about to reach the Imperial study, I was intercepted by the Dowager Empress's people. This was my first time meeting the Dowager Empress since entering the palace. She usually stayed in seclusion, even during various festivals. The imposing woman before me had several prayer beads on her left hand, and the scent of sandalwood was overwhelming.
I heard you worked under Christopher before entering the palace?
Yes.
He is just a leisurely duke looking for some fun. Being able to enter the palace is already a royal favor.
Yes.
If you ever say anything that disrupts the harmony between the brothers, I will personally come and cut out your tongue.
Yes. Although I hadn't watched many palace dramas, I understood the Dowager Empress's implicit threat clearly.
She wanted me to keep quiet about Christopher's attempt on the emperor's life. It seemed this mother favored her younger son more. After leaving the Dowager Empress, Lady Yu couldn't shake off her gloom. As a modern person, she was unfamiliar with the court system and palace intrigues.
If one day they stage a coup, would I have to watch Alexander be harmed?
These days, he was busy with tax reforms and rarely visited her. But one evening, after dinner, he suddenly summoned her. On the bed, Alexander played with her hair and asked nonchalantly,
Why has your personality changed so much? Today, when your father came to the study, I chatted with him. He said you were the most obedient and quiet daughter at home.
Perhaps I am just a mysterious woman.
As she hesitated whether to tell him she was a time traveler, Alexander suddenly threw her off the bed. Shocked, she clutched her sore backside.
How could you be so inconsiderate?
Lady Yu's behavior is erratic and unfit to serve. Send her to the cold palace.
Iron bars, iron windows, iron chains. The place was familiar, but her state of mind was entirely different. So, the emperor truly is heartless. Even if she, a modern person, was willing to spend her life in this deep palace, it was just a misplaced true heart.
When I'm sad, I tend to mutter to myself. As a journalist with diluted cultural roots, my mutterings are different from others.
She closed her eyes and began to recall the entertainment news she had heard before.
A supposedly pure goddess was actually a streetwise girl before her debut. A movie star had 3 children with different mothers. A comedian was actually a saint, crying over emotional videos after work.
After talking for a while, her mouth was dry, so she stopped to rest.
Is there more? Is there more?
She jumped in fright. Looking up, she saw Alexander's entire harem neatly sitting on the roof of the cold palace. Even Victoria's cat and 5 dogs were there.
How did you get up there?
The next second, Isabella lifted her onto the roof.
Like this. Got it, got it.
They said they were here on Alexander's behalf to win her back, explaining that he did what he did to protect her and that she shouldn't be angry with him.
I had already figured that out, but if he truly valued me, he would have been honest instead of using such hurtful actions to protect me.
In her view of love, she could understand and sacrifice for him, but only if they were united and communicated openly. Seeing her resolve, they stopped persuading her.
We see the Emperor as our benefactor. We all hope you and he can be happy.
She didn't elaborate, but having read many novels, Lady Yu could guess most of it. Alexander couldn't bear to see a group of young women wasted in the palace, so he left them to live freely. He was a noble emperor, a man of integrity.
But so what? My backside still hurts.
Back in the cold palace, I resumed my solitary life, though I had no worries about food, clothing, or other necessities. However, there were always some who would throw things over the walls of the cold palace. On the first day, a kite was thrown in, painted with a cute girl's face, which I used to start a fire. On the second day, a handkerchief with the words "Your heart is like mine, never to betray our love" was thrown in, which I used to wipe my mouth. On the third day, a sachet embroidered with 2 mandarin ducks was thrown in, which I used to tease Victoria's dog. After half a month, the junk thrown in had piled up in one corner of my courtyard. At this rate, I could change careers and start collecting junk in the cold palace. I rolled up my sleeves, climbed a ladder, and hid behind some bamboo, waiting to catch the culprits. Before long, 2 figures appeared. The shorter one said timidly,
"Do we really have to do this? My leg from the last fall hasn't healed yet."
She must be very aggrieved inside. I want her to know every day that she is in my heart.
Eunuch Williams had just climbed up when he saw my sinister face behind the bamboo. His scream scared away the nearby birds. Seeing that he was about to fall, I quickly reached out to catch him. While Eunuch Williams managed to grab the wall and sit safely, I fell down, and after a dizzying spin, I saw Alexander's face. He held me steadily in his arms and asked if I was all right.
"Are you all right?"
"I'm fine. Please, let me get down."
He refused and carried me all the way back to the room. It had been a while since I last saw him, and now, suddenly meeting him, I felt awkward and didn't know what to say. He sat by the bed, looking around the room. Victoria and the others always brought things when they visited me, so over time, the cold palace's decor became indistinguishable from a regular palace.
"You seem quite comfortable here."
Of course, I don't have to serve someone who changes moods as easily as flipping a page.
"Just bear with it a little longer." He stood up and patted my head, indicating he was leaving.
I watched him walk to the door, but then he stopped, staring at the chewed-up sachet on the floor.
"Isn't this the one I gave you?"
He hesitated and turned around. By then, I had already covered my face with a blanket, trying to minimize my presence.
"Never mind." I heard him laugh. After some footsteps faded away, the room returned to silence.
I pulled down the blanket and looked at the ceiling. How had he lost so much weight in just half a month? Being an emperor is truly not easy. After balancing the ministers, he has to guard against his brothers. Standing atop a vast empire, the experience must be quite bitter. When the concubines visited, they would always subtly inform me about the current situation. The Dowager Empress, using Alexander's lack of an heir as an excuse, wanted to force him to make Duke Henry the crown prince. Alexander naturally refused, so the Dowager Empress started wearing mourning clothes and feigning illness, prompting a group of ministers to advise Alexander on the importance of filial piety. The situation had reached a point where there were only 2 possible outcomes: either Alexander agreed with the Dowager Empress, or he patiently waited for Duke Henry to rebel. But with the new policies just being implemented, internal strife would undoubtedly lead to widespread suffering. Without me, this would be a deadlock. But now that I'm here, things aren't so complicated. That night, I lit an oil lamp and spread out my paper and pen. I began to write, my brush dancing across the paper as one masterpiece after another unfolded.
Secrets of the Palace, the Dowager Empress's male companions. Questionable lineage, years of effort for another's child. Palace upheaval, 10 impacts on you and me.
If the concubines cooperated with me, by dawn, these articles would be seen by all the citizens of the capital. In 10 days, the entire nation would be reading them. As I expected, the next day, a group of ministers held up the article "Questionable Lineage, Years of Effort for Another's Child," and demanded that Duke Henry and His Majesty undergo a blood test to confirm their kinship. Alexander looked troubled as he sat on his high seat.
How can we test this? I am not his father.
I heard that the Dowager Empress fainted on the spot. When she woke up, she was already in the royal mausoleum. The ministers said that to prevent the Dowager Empress from keeping male companions and losing her virtue in her old age, it was best for her to pray for the dynasty in the mausoleum. Not long after waking up, the Dowager Empress fainted again. From then on, the matter of making Duke Henry the Crown Prince was never mentioned again. With the Dowager Empress dealt with, there was still the rebellious Duke Henry to handle.
Pitiful emperor, working around the clock for the people. All-powerful emperor versus dependent duke, the obvious choice. He supported rebellion, and later his whole family was imprisoned. His wife can't hold her head up because he is a traitor.
After these articles were published, the citizens' patriotism soared, and they all gathered outside Duke Henry's residence to supervise his behavior. For a time, the street snack business also flourished. Living in the bustling city became unbearable for Duke Henry, and he finally ran to the palace.
I want to resign and travel the world.
Seeing his sincerity, Alexander reluctantly agreed. With that, both the harem and the court returned to their previous harmonious state. With some free time, Alexander came to the cold palace to fetch me. Remembering how he had previously thrown me to the ground, I resolutely refused to share a room with him again. Alexander grabbed my collar and dragged me out while I clung to the bedsheets, resisting with all my might.
Are you coming or not?
No, no, no!
How about this?
What?
I turned to look at him, and Alexander immediately leaned in to kiss me.
This.
Oh no, how did he know I respond better to gentleness? That night, Alexander lazily spoke while holding me.
Write a happy story yourself.
After all that fuss, you still want to exploit me.
I got up, intending to strangle him, but my hands stopped when I saw his bright eyes. Instead, I covered his eyes with my hands, out of sight, out of mind. He pulled my hand down and kissed it, then held me as we lay down.
I want to make you empress.
Me?
Who else?
But I talk a lot.
That's okay.
And I still want to write tabloids.
Fine.
And after arguments, I want to stay in the cold palace.
Fine.
Hey! What are you doing?
Creating material for you.
What?
The cold-hearted emperor, 7 times a night.